Texas is in play. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. I'm joined by Texas State Representative James Talarico. Always a pleasure to have you on Lights On. Welcome back, James.
Thanks. I always love coming here. So thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We were just talking before this. We hit record on this recording about how close the Senate race is with your friend, Colin Allred, going up against incumbent Ted Cruz. Can we finally, do you think, in this race, James, send Cancun Cruz packing?
I think this is the year. I don't think people around the country realize how close we are to turning Texas blue. Donald Trump won this state by only 5 points in the last presidential election. Ted Cruz won his last race by only 2.5 points. So I believe that Texas is the biggest battleground state in the country. And this year we've got an incredible candidate leading the top of our ticket here in Texas, my friend Colin Allred. And your viewers may know that Colin played football at Baylor before becoming a voting rights lawyer, but they may not know that he was born to a single mom like me. And so as a congressman, he's fighting every day to give every Texan the chance to chase their version of the American dream. And that's a bright contrast with the guy he's running against. Colin is running against the worst senator in America, in my opinion, because on January 6th, Ted Cruz plotted to overturn the election. He fanned the flames of insurrection. During the blackout that killed 700 of my fellow Texans, as you mentioned, Ted Cruz hopped on a flight to Cancun, leaving all of us. And a lot of people forget this. He left his own dog to shiver.
Oh, I remember. I will never forget that picture.
And then in the 2016 primary, Donald Trump called Heidi Cruz, his wife, ugly. And Ted Cruz turned around and endorsed Donald Trump after that. So what I've been asking people around the state of Texas is, if Ted Cruz will abandon his wife, his dog, and his country, what makes you think he won't abandon you? Colin Allred, I know him personally. He'll never abandon Texas, and he'll never abandon the people of this state. So I'm hopeful that we'll give Ted a permanent vacation in Cancun on November 5th, and he'll never have to come back to Texas.
There you go. He can just move there, right?
That's right. Yeah. He wants to be there so bad. We're happy to give him a one-way ticket.
Oh, man. James, you talk about Ted Cruz, and I just think that this guy is like the epitome of the cowardice. I mean, these people try to run on some like manly platform, or, like they're the alpha males. This is a guy who, like you said, Donald Trump called his wife ugly. Donald Trump had his friend at the National Enquirer run stories that his father was responsible for JFK's execution. I mean, these people are just... Could you possibly be emasculated more than Ted Cruz has been emasculated by Donald Trump?
Yeah, I find it so funny that Ted Cruz and Donald Trump are supposedly the epitome of masculinity, when Ted Cruz grovels before Donald Trump, and then Donald Trump grovels before Vladimir Putin, and actually every other dictator around the country. So, I was brought up to believe that being a man means standing for what's right, and standing up for other people and taking care of other people. That's what my dad showed me growing up. And I don't see any of those qualities in Ted Cruz or Donald Trump.
I'm into that. Talking about standing up for people, you and your colleagues have done something very honorable in the Texas House that I want to talk about, and that is writing a letter to call for the stay of execution of Robert Roberson. Now, just to refresh people's memory, if they're not up to date on this story, this is an autistic man who was wrongfully convicted of murdering his child, his baby. And maybe you can remind me how many years ago this was. He has been sitting in prison about to be executed. He was convicted on a debunked, never scientifically proven shaken baby theory. And there have been many calling for him not to be executed. Now, I learned just today that Greg Abbott has literally sent an amicus brief against the action that you and your colleagues have taken. This is, once again, a man who claims to be Christian. One of the commandments that I hold so dear is thou shalt not kill. Can you tell us what's going on with this execution in Texas?
Yeah, this is not just a Democratic effort. This is a bipartisan effort in the Texas House of Representatives, which is pretty extraordinary in this age of extreme partisanship and polarization. It's rare to see Democrats and Republicans coming together to try to do something. But that's what's happening here in the lower chamber. It's Democratic and Republican lawmakers coming together to stop the execution of an innocent man in the state of Texas. Mr. Roberson has been in prison in solitary confinement for most of my life. And the evidence is overwhelming that he's innocent of this crime. In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. You can listen to the lead detective in the investigation that put Mr. Roberson away. He now believes that Mr. Roberson is innocent of this crime for a lot of different reasons, because we now understand what autism looks like after a tragedy or a trauma. We understand the junk science that was used to convict Mr. Roberson, and many more reasons. It is very possible, in fact, likely, that the state of Texas is attempting to execute an innocent man. And so Democrats and Republicans are trying to do the right thing, but Greg Abbott and his appointed Board of Parole and Pardons has forced this execution to move forward. Right now, we're kind of in a state of limbo, and the lower chamber is fighting to delay and hopefully stop this execution, while the governor is pushing for it to move forward. And as you mentioned, Greg Abbott calls himself a Christian. The entire symbol of our religion is of the execution of an innocent man, and so our religion teaches us mercy and forgiveness. And it certainly teaches us to watch out for innocent people and how they may be hurt by the powerful, particularly the government in the state of Texas. And so, I'm hopeful. I'm praying every night that we'll do the right thing, that we can protect Mr. Roberson, and we can make sure that justice is done here in the state of Texas.
I'm certainly rooting for you, and I hope so too. I'll remind people that under Donald Trump's administration, the federal death penalty was brought back for the first time in many years. And there's some articles out there that I highly encourage people to look up about the people who were not granted clemency that came to Donald Trump as president in his final days, and the suffering that they endured. And instead, he granted clemency and pardons to his rich friends.
And I'll just add, for those that don't know a lot about this case, it exposes the brokenness in our justice system. Not only was Mr. Roberson convicted of a crime that he didn't commit, but he has been forced to spend about 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, which is cruel and unusual in any sense of that phrase. And so this is barbaric, and it's immoral, and it should offend all of us, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're religious or not. And I'm hopeful that this can move people in both political parties to do right and protect this innocent man.
I hope so, yeah. If you've ever seen Robert Roberson in an interview, you can tell that he is a very kind individual, and it's beautiful to see everybody coming together to save his life and to shed a light, as you said, on the injustice of the system. He is not alone. So many people suffer this. So I want to talk, you were talking a little bit about Christianity. I brought the subject up, and I was reading an article, actually, James, before we started this, about how you have really gotten under the skin of some conservative so-called Christians, because you call them out on how their platform does not abide by the teachings of Jesus Christ. And I wanted to just remind our viewers of a viral clip that went out of you not too long ago, where you were saying basically Jesus and Donald Trump are polar opposites. And you tick down a list. I want you to kind of just give us a refresher on that list. Although I got to take issue with one thing you said, James. One thing you said, and that is that you said Jesus lost, Donald Trump is obsessed with winning. I actually brought out on my show the week that your clip came out, I said, let us be clear. Jesus Christ was the most victorious man that ever walked this globe, and Donald Trump is a huge loser. So that's my one correction. But other than that, you got the floor.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And in this clip that you're talking about, I said that Christian nationalists have taken Trump as their new Christ because he's everything the first was not. And so much of the way Jesus acted in the world, so much of who he was, is not popular, right? The fact that Jesus was poor and Trump is rich, that makes Trump a lot more attractive to our modern day sensibilities. And the fact that Jesus was meek and Trump is, pretends to be so strong, that is more attractive to some of our modern sensibilities. And then the fact that Jesus willingly lost his life, lost his reputation, lost his friends, literally lost everything a human being can lose. And the fact that Donald Trump is obsessed with trying to win and show that he's a winner, that should prove that Trump's way is much more attractive to people in our modern world than the way of Jesus. It's always been surprising to me that Christianity became the most popular religion in the world, because the way of Jesus is so countercultural. It's so counterintuitive. We as little fragile human beings, we're obsessed with winning and proving that we're undefeated and that we're powerful and that we're wealthy and that we have high status. And those are all the things Jesus told us not to care about. Yeah. And you can even see it in our modern day religion. I had so many people reach out to me at the end after I put up that clip saying, well, Jesus wasn't actually poor. Jesus wasn't actually unique. He didn't actually lose. And it's like, the gospel tells us the only way we save our life is to lose it. Letting go of all of these things that we think are important, including our own lives, that's central to the gospel. We win by losing is the entire message.
Yeah, well, we give up the material sense of being, and then we gain those spiritual riches that only come with self-sacrifice that, as you very aptly pointed out, Donald Trump knows nothing about.
Right. And so that's a hard and it's been an unpopular message throughout a lot of the history of the church. And it's even unpopular among a lot of my fellow Christians. And I'll tell you, it's a straight and narrow path that is hard to follow. I fail at following the way of Jesus all the time. I am an imperfect Christian like all of us. But it is helpful to recognize the ways in which Donald Trump is antithetical to the ways of Jesus. They approach power and wealth and status and winning in diametrically opposite ways. And so that's important for us to reckon with as we enter into this election.
100%. As you're talking about this attitude of winning at all costs, I'm reminded of the movie The Apprentice. Did you see it yet?
I haven't. No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. So spoiler alert. If you know anything about the history of Roy Cohn, this is no spoiler, but he basically met a very sad end. And he is the one that basically gave Donald Trump his guiding principles: win at all costs, attack, deny everything, never accept defeat. And you watch that movie and you see the end for Roy Cohn. And I tweeted this out over the weekend. I think the moral of the story is you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And in many ways, I think that end is coming for Donald Trump. You can try all your life, especially if you do believe in any kind of divine justice, to escape punishment for your wrongdoing. But eventually it's coming, right? You can't eternally avoid reckoning with who you are and what you've done.
That's right. And I know you're a person of faith, and so that phrase "live by the sword, die by the sword" comes out of the mouth of Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's a warning that violence and hatred are self-consuming. It's like fire, and eventually destroys everything it touches, including your own soul. And so that's why the great teachers throughout human history, including Jesus and Buddha and Moses and Muhammad, they all taught us the way of nonviolence, of sacrificial love, to turn the other cheek. There's a lot of wisdom in that, being able to love your enemies and recognize and validate their full humanity. That's not the kind of politics that Donald Trump is engaged in. He is obsessed with power, earthly power. I've often defined Christian nationalism as the worship of power, whether it's social power or economic power or political power. And in my opinion, the opposite of faith is not doubt, because we all have doubts from time to time. That's a healthy part of any faith. You can't turn on the news and see what's happening across the world, children dying and people starving, and not have some doubt that love can win. But the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's control. It's when you stop trusting something larger than yourself, and you stop trusting love, you start taking power for yourself, and you start taking control for yourself. And that's what Donald Trump and Christian nationalism is all about. They're trying to control what we read, what we learn, who we marry, where we travel, when we have children. It's all about trying to dominate and control other people so that they can consolidate their own power and wealth. And so that's why the message of Jesus and the message from the great faith traditions throughout human history have a lot to say to us in this moment. A lot of progressives, like the ones that watch your program, they kind of think, well, religion only has done harm in the world and we should throw the whole thing out. I really do believe, as a person of faith, that there is a baby in that bathwater. And if you try to throw the whole thing out, you are throwing out some beautiful wisdom that human beings have accumulated throughout the centuries. And it's something that's even more valuable to us in 2024 than it's ever been before.
I almost forgot this topic because I enjoyed our conversation so much. I forgot my list, but we have to talk before you leave for a minute, James, about the issue of abortion in Texas.
Yeah.
It's so serious. I know you said recently, God help us if Republicans get their way in this presidential election and across the country. Please lay out the stakes for us.
Well, it's actually segues perfectly from what we were just talking about. We're talking about control and how that is central to Donald Trump's politics, to Project 2025, to Christian nationalism, and how it actually betrays a lack of faith. You don't have faith in something larger, whether you call that God or love. Then you start to take control of your surroundings, and you're obsessed with winning and dominating others and accumulating wealth for yourself. The issue of abortion has never been about life. It has always been about controlling women. And I know that because here in Texas, we have the most extreme abortion ban in the country. When Donald Trump overturned Roe v. Wade, Texas Republicans banned abortion, even in cases of rape, incest, and threats to the woman's health. And since that day, 26,000 Texas women have been forced to give birth to their rapist baby. We just saw the most recent data that showed infant and maternal mortality have spiked since abortion was banned in Texas. We've also seen that pregnant women with life-threatening complications are being told to wait in emergency room parking lots until they go into sepsis. So don't tell me that you care about life when it's clear that this has always been about controlling women. If you cared about life, you would make sure that we treated this as the public health issue that it is, and that we would watch out for the health of women across the state of Texas, across the country. But that's not what we're seeing from Republican extremists like Greg Abbott, like Ted Cruz, and like Donald Trump. I'm hopeful that voters in both political parties will reject this extremism when they walk into the voting booth this November.
Me too. Absolutely. When you said the word control, first word that popped into my mind was fear, because you're talk about the opposite of faith. You're distrusting love to work its way in our lives. And so I too hope that those Texans realize that they have an ally in Colin Allred, who they don't have to be afraid of, who's not some radical leftist as his opponent might try to portray him as, but he is someone who's there to represent all of Texas and really, take away that destructive element of control that the government has tried to inject into people's lives. James Talarico, always a pleasure to have you on. You're welcome anytime here on Lights On.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today on Lights On. You can always find Lights On by subscribing to Lights On with Jessica Denson wherever you get your audio podcast. And the best way to find these videos is to subscribe to Jessica Denson on YouTube. Thanks, everybody.